All right, so 4.8, part 2. We're still dealing with complex numbers. As a reminder from yesterday, if we have I squared, this changes into -1. So keep this in mind, it'll come in handy today. All right, so in adding and subtracting complex numbers, we have to remember we can only add like terms together. So here, when you're adding, you can just get rid of the parentheses. So it's -12 plus 10i plus 4 plus 12i. So when you're adding, we can just lose the parentheses. We don't need them. And then we have to combine like terms. So what's a like term with -12? 4, because they don't have i's. So I'm adding the real numbers together, and then I'll add the imaginary ones together. So it's -12 plus 4. -8. And then what's 10i plus 12i? 22i. And then when writing these, we have to make sure the real number's first. So the real number comes first, and the imaginary number is second. So this is our answer. So we just add the real numbers together, add the imaginary numbers together. We cannot add these together because we have a real number and imaginary number. So they're not like terms, we can't combine them. So you cannot add these together. All right, so the next one, we're adding, so we can just get rid of our parentheses, we don't need them. And we're gonna add our like terms. So what's a like term with 4? -1. So what's 4 minus 1? 3. So we add our real numbers, then we add the imaginary. So what's 6i plus 8i? 14i. That's our answer. So remember the real number first, then the imaginary. All right, next we're subtracting. So the only difference when we subtract is that we have to distribute that minus or that negative sign to everything after. So this is 7 plus 2i, and then we have to distribute that negative, so it's -7 minus 5i. So make sure you distribute. So when subtracting, you have to distribute. Distribute that negative. And then after we do that, we can combine our like terms. So start with the real numbers. So we have 7. What's 7 minus 7? 0. So if it's 0, you can write it, but you don't need to. And then we do the imaginary numbers. So what's 2i minus 5i? -3i. So this would just be -3i because we don't need to write the 0. All right, so again, we're subtracting. What do I have to do first? Distribute. So I distribute that. So the first parenthesis stays the same because I'm just distributing it to everything after. So it's -5 plus I. What happens to the -7?
Positive.
It becomes a +7. And what happens to the -3i?
Positive.
It becomes a +3i. Perfect. So start with the real numbers. I have -5 plus 7. What's -5 plus 7? So this would be +2. And then what's I plus 3i?
Plus 4.
So plus 4i. And that's our answer. Multiplication looks a little bit different.
Does addition look the same as subtraction?
Yeah. But when you're doing addition, you don't, like you can get rid of the parentheses.
Okay.
All right. So with multiplication, we have 2 things here and 2 things in here. So we're going to have to FOIL. Anybody remember what FOILing is? Kind of. So FOIL stands for first, outer, inner, and last. So when we FOIL, we multiply the first terms. So it'll be 4 times -1. What's 4 times -1? negative 4. Then we multiply the outer, so the outside one. So 4 times negative 2i, what would that be? Negative 8i, perfect. So we can multiply a real number and an imaginary number. We just can't add them together, but we can multiply. Then we multiply the inner, so that would be the 2 on the inside. So it's 3i times negative 1. Negative 3i. And then we multiply the last. So it'll be the last one in the first parentheses and the last one in the second.
Negative 6i squared.
Perfect. Negative 6i squared. So we multiply 3 times negative 2, which gives us negative 6. And since we have 2 i's, I times I would be I squared.
Isn't I squared negative 1?
Awesome. Perfect. I squared is actually negative 1. So we're going to change this I squared to be a negative 1. And what's negative 6 times negative 1? Positive 6. So we just change the I squared to be a negative 1 and change the sign of whatever that number is. So it's now plus 6. And we got rid of the I squared, so the I squared's not there anymore. So now, is 6 a real number or an imaginary number? It's a real number now because it doesn't have an I, because we got rid of it. So now let's combine our real numbers. So we have negative 4 plus 6. That'll be 2. And then combine our imaginary numbers. So what's negative 8i minus 3i? Negative 11i. And that's our answer. So this one's a little bit different because we are only multiplying one term by 2 terms. So we don't have to FOIL. We only FOIL when it's 2 and 2. So here we just distribute. So when you're just multiplying one term times 2 terms, all we do is distribute. So what's 3i times negative 5? Negative 15i. So we just multiply the numbers and the I just stays there. And then what is 3i times 2i? So plus 6i squared. What does the I squared turn into? Negative 1. So what's 6 times negative 1? It becomes a negative 6. And we get rid of the I squared. What do you think I have to do next? I have to put it in order. So I need the real number first. So what's the real number here? Negative 6. And what's the imaginary number? Perfect. So it'll be negative 6 minus 15i. All right, next we have 9 plus 4i squared. So just as an example, when I have 3 squared, what am I doing here when I square it? Multiplying 3 times 3. So I have this whole thing squared. So it's like multiplying the whole thing by itself. So I can get rid of that squared. And it's just 9 plus 4i times 9 plus 4i. What do I have to do when I have 2 terms times 2 terms? I have to FOIL. So I'm going to multiply the first, the outer, the inner, and then the last. So what are my first terms that I'm multiplying here? 9 times 9. So the first one in each parentheses. What's 9 times 9? 81. Then I multiply the outer. So what are the outer terms I multiply here? 9 times 4i. What's 9 times 4i? 36i. Then I have the inner. So what are my inner terms? 4i times 9. What's 4i times 9? 36i. And then the last. So what are the last terms? 4i times 4i. What's 4i times 4i? 16i squared. Awesome. Because 4 times 4 is 16. And I have 2 i's, so it's an I squared. What should I do next? Awesome. So the I squared turns into -1. So what is the 16 turn into? -16. So I just changed the sign of whatever that is. What do I do next? Combine like terms. So I have 81 minus 16. What's 81 minus 16? 65. And then I have 36i plus 36i. So plus 72i. And that's our answer. What do I have to do here? FOIL. Since I have two terms times two terms, I have to FOIL. So I'm multiplying the first, the outer, the inner, and the last. So what are the first terms I'm going to multiply? 4 times 3. What's 4 times 3? 12. Then the outers. What are the outer ones? 4 times 4i. So what's 4 times 4i? 16i. Awesome. And then the inner. So what are the inner ones?
2i.
What's 2i times 3?
6i.
So plus 6i. And then the last. What are the last ones?
2i. 4i.
2i times 4i. So that'll be plus 8i
I squared.
because I have two i's being multiplied there. What should I do next?
You have to cancel out the square root, the I squared,
What does the I squared turn into?
-8.
Awesome. So the I squared turns into -8. And then what should I do?
By my terms.
Combine like terms. So what's a like term with 12?
12 minus 8.
What's 12 minus 8? 4.
And then 16i.
Awesome. 16i plus 6i is 22i. So the answer is 4 plus 22i. Remember, real number first, then the imaginary.